I'm going to be blunt here. You probably started writing your novel, got a few pages in, and then you hit a wall. You know what I mean. Your opening just isn't working. And if you're not careful, you could make one of the classic mistakes that will have readers put your book down faster than you can say chapter 2. Today, I'm going to walk you through 11 terrible ways to start a novel. And trust me, if you just avoid these mistakes, your book is going to be in a completely different league. The first mistake is starting with a prologue. Look, I get it. Prologues sound like a cool idea. They've probably been in lots of books that you've read, but unless that prologue directly connects to the story or gives crucial context, it's just filler. You're wasting valuable pages on something that doesn't do anything for the plot or the reader. And more importantly, you're actually risking losing the reader before you've actually got a chance to get them intrigued by your story. So get to the action. Don't make your reader wait for it. They don't want to wait. They want the action right away. If your prologue doesn't make the reader think, I have to know what happens next, then just scrap it altogether. Your readers don't have time for unnecessary setup. They want to get straight into the story. I couldn't tell you the amount of times I've read a prologue or just got bored during the prologue and just given up on the book. The second mistake is opening with a dream sequence. The amount of times I've started a book that has a dream sequence. Nobody wants to read this as the first thing in your novel. It's been done a million times and it's just a cop-out really, because it confuses the reader and it doesn't actually add anything to the real story. We want reality, not a weird cryptic dream that doesn't really mean anything to us. So start with something that matters. Dreams can be great for building atmosphere, but definitely not as a starting point. Your first line should grab the reader's attention. It needs to be something memorable. The third mistake is excessive backstory. Don't dump your character's entire life story at the start, right? No one cares about their childhood, family, history, or past relationships. They don't know the character yet. They don't know anything about them. They're not invested, so why would they care? If you do this at the start, you risk just boring your reader. Instead, you want to weave in a character's backstory as the book gets going, right? Let the character reveal bits and pieces naturally. This is going to keep things interesting, and then it will make the reader want to learn more about them and ultimately progress through your book and your plot, which is the ultimate goal. Now, the other big mistake we see is a slow start. If your first chapter feels like a slow slog, then you will lose readers. Nobody has time for long descriptions of the setting or the character staring out a window or contemplating life, right? Get to the point. Open with something that grabs attention, whether it's a character in a tense situation or something unusual happening. Think about a movie you watched recently. The opening scene is always something that hooks you in. Your first chapter should be like a shark. It should bite the reader, right? It just jumps out at them and bites them, and that's what makes them want to keep going. The fifth mistake I see a lot is using cliches. It was a dark and stormy night. He woke up all of a sudden. These are not the kind of lines that will get your reader excited. They're just noise because we've heard it all before, and frankly, it's lazy writing. So think about fresh, exciting, new ways to introduce characters. The key here is to be original. Readers don't want recycled lines from other books that they've read. Really come up with something unique. Even if it's a bit wacky, that's so much better than falling into the trap of being like everybody else. Number 6 is to overload the reader with character names. I get it, you've got a whole world of characters, but throwing too many characters and too many names at your reader in the first few pages is just overwhelming. Start with the essentials. Let your reader get comfortable with a few key characters, then introduce the rest as the story unfolds. If you introduce the characters too fast, your reader will get lost. You want to introduce the key players and then build from there. Mistake 7, starting with a question. What if the world was ending? What would you do if? This is such a lazy way and such a boring way to start the book. It doesn't hook the reader. It doesn't tell them anything about the story. You want to start with something concrete, an action, a moment, a character, something that immediately grabs them and then immerses them in the story. Some people argue that questions are great later, but For me, I really don't like the use of questions in a book. Give your reader something to experience. You should be driving the plot and the narrative forward. Mistake number 8 is opening with a quote. Opening your novel with a quote is like putting a bumper sticker on your book. It's just unnecessary. Let the content of the book speak for itself. You don't need to lean on someone else's words to tell your story. It's your story. And often when you use a quote from someone else, it immediately shows that there's this higher authority. You've spent the time writing the book, so you're the author, you are the authority, your words are what matter. Don't rely on somebody else's word. Mistake number 9 is trying to be overly clever. You might have a great idea for a twist or a quirky opening, but if it's too complicated or confusing, your readers, again, they won't stick around. You need to keep it simple. Your opening needs to make sense, be clear, and draw the reader in, not leave them scratching their heads or having to work too hard to figure out what's going on. Clarity really is the key here. Don't try to impress with complexity. Instead, impress with a clear, gripping introduction to your story. Mistake number 10 is starting with a fight scene. This might surprise you because so many books do this, and it's tempting to throw your characters into an action-packed opening scene. But if it's not directly tied to the plot, or the characters, it's just noise. Fight scenes can work well if they reveal something about the character or they push the story forward immediately. Mistake number 11 is trying to explain everything at once. Don't dump the whole world building or rules of your universe into the first few pages. This mistake you see a lot more, of course, in fantasy or sci-fi novels. You need to let the story unfold naturally. Give your readers a taste of what's going on and then let them discover the details as they go along. Largely with all of these mistakes, you're noticing a theme where either too much tries to get packed in, you need just enough to hook the reader, and then let things develop as you go. The plot, the character, they will reveal the world. You don't need to do this huge info dump right at the start. So just trust, again, your reader's ability to figure things out as they go. There you have it, 11 terrible ways to start a novel and why you need to avoid them if you want your book to succeed. You really want to think about how you hook your readers from page 1, because remember, ultimately, when you go to a bookshop, I do this, I'm sure you do the same, pick a book off the shelf, you take a look at the title, and you read some of the first few pages. And guess what? If they don't hook you, that book is going straight back on the shelf, and you're going to pick up the next book. That's why this is so important. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure YouTube is recommending another one of my helpful and valuable videos right here, so go ahead and click that link.